Hey everybody, it's Bo with Game Octane. Dark Devotion is a 2D action RPG inspired by Dark Souls and Salt and Sanctuary. Can Dark Devotion find its way to the light, or will it succumb to the void of similar titles? Stay tuned to find out. Dark Devotion is a side-scrolling action RPG that follows in the footprints of Salt and Sanctuary, Hollow Knight, and Death's Gambit. Described as 2D Dark Souls games, these feature a steep difficulty curve and animation-heavy combat priority that ensures knowing when to dodge and when to strike are heavily prized skills. Dark Devotion has a lot to live up to in the genre that's already seen a handful of highly polished and loved titles. In Dark Devotion, you play as a devout warrior traveling to the depths of a dark cavern. Though the game doesn't exactly go into detail about the nature of it, it seems like the dungeon has a dark, living presence. It draws sinner and devout alike. You quickly find yourself dead to a mysterious foe and brought back by the dungeon for unknown purposes. Overall, the story feels a little thin and quickly just becomes beat more of the dungeon to beat more of the dungeon. You don't really get any big story reveals or character twists. Side characters do exist in the world, but aren't given much personality or dialogue to expound on their background. The retro 2D pixel art on display reminds me vaguely of Death's Gambit. It shines the most in boss battles, as each boss has unique attack animations and various stages in the battle that may change either the look of the boss or the moveset the boss uses. When you're crawling the dungeon, it has a dark and dreary feel, but this can also be a bit of an issue. The game can become incredibly dark at times. The dark artwork, mixed with a lot of hidden traps in the dungeon, mean you can spend a good amount of time crawling forward a few steps at a time to make sure you can tell where the next enemy, trap, or drop is. On the flip side, in Death's Gambit, each area feels incredibly unique. You can be in a dark and dreary cellar one minute and then find yourself in snow and ice-covered mountains. Each section of Death's Gambit's world feels unique to the section and has a lot of character. Dark Devotion begins to feel very similar because any defining backgrounds or environments in the dungeon are shrouded in darkness. It all fades into one dark dungeon, each place looking very similar. Sound design is spot on for setting a creepy catacomb feel. With the dark and dreary world, you can hear enemies lurking just outside your vision. Wooden flailing spike traps grind in the darkness, just waiting to catch you off guard. It really works to set an ambiance to the whole place that always made me feel just a little on edge when I was in new and unexplored areas of the map. I personally wish there had been any sort of dialogue noise of some sort, even if just a sim-style mumbling to make it feel a little more lived in. As it stands, dialogue with characters is entirely silent in a way that just seems to stand out against the rest of the sound design. For being a Souls-like game, the difficulty curve is not as high as I had expected, although my first hour or so with the game became quickly frustrating until I got it, and I understood how the game wanted me to tackle combat. Right out of the gate, when you first enter the ancient catacombs, you will no doubt be immediately greeted by a spear trap from the ceiling. Then you will fall into a pit of spikes. If you make it past those unscathed, the first enemy will undoubtedly knock you into the spikes you just cleared, even if you shield. It's a very harsh setup that teaches a few lessons that the game wants to impart. Always look before you leap, expect the unexpected, and shielding will prevent damage, but you will still get knocked backwards. My personal takeaway from the shield lesson was throw it away and never use it again. Spikes will kill you instantly, no matter how good your run in the dungeon has been going. I wish the game had chosen a slightly more fair layout to impart these lessons, because the spear trap is almost entirely hidden in the dark. And even later in the game, I was still falling for it every once in a while. Now, I played most of my time with a controller, which has your weapon attacks on the right trigger and the weapon's secondary ability on the left trigger, and it's going to be a shield or possibly a unique dodge. In addition to this, the left and right bumpers are left and right dodge rolls that provide invincibility frames to roll through attacks. While it can seem nice to have dedicated dodge buttons in either direction, I wish I had actually just had a dodge button that would dodge whichever direction I'm facing. There are many times I would be facing an enemy in one direction and keep dodging backwards to get out of the reach of their attacks. Then, when I would come to an enemy facing the other direction, I would be dodging the wrong way as my brain just felt like the button I had been hitting was a dodge backwards button. But since my directions were switched, I would just keep diving towards the enemy's attacks. This led to many clumsily lost fights and accidental slips into spike pits. There are also not much in the way of verticality options. You can't jump or clamber onto ledges, you can only move up if you find a ladder. However, exploring in the cave is often about dropping down from ledges into areas. It keeps pushing you forward, so if you miss something, often there's no way to go back unless you start to run over. After playing games like Dead Cells where you feel so agile and mobile, movement here felt a little stiff and limiting. Dark Devotion does bring some interesting systems to the table. There's a series of boons and curses that you can be afflicted by as you traverse the dungeon. These can either give you some more stamina regeneration, give you faster or more accurate arrow shots, or even give you health every time you enter a new room. The problem I found is that I have no clue what triggers these effects. Sometimes it seems like picking up an item, opening a chest, killing an enemy, or just rolling can randomly cause these effects to trigger. I've tried to take note of the actions I was doing, but I've had a stamina regeneration boon activate when I rolled past an enemy one time, but not other times. It's a system I wish I had a better understanding of or a better explanation, because the boons are quite beneficial and the curses are generally to be avoided. While delving in the dungeon, you will also come across a variety of altars, statues, and mechanisms that require cost and faith. Your faith is charged by taking down enemies. These statues are often used to heal your character, get better items, or open doors with more chests inside to loot. Keeping your faith topped up is always helpful in the depths of the dungeon. Between each life in the dungeon, of which there will be many, you'll find yourself back at a sanctuary in the depths, a place where some have been revived in the dungeon for unknown reasons. Here you can change your gear loadout, upgrade your character's stats, and take shortcuts back into the dungeon. There are also teleportation altars you will find in your runs that you can activate to return to in the event you die. These are one-way trips from the sanctuary back to the dungeon, but it helps you keep pushing further into the dungeon, even when the going gets tough. Reaching far enough into the dungeon can even unlock new shortcut routes to help you start further on in the depths. You can also find a quest giver that will give you some targets to take out within the depths, usually rewarding you with some items for your troubles. It's a nice little added side quest touch that helps to breathe a little bit more variety into your crawls into the abyss. To unlock new weapons and items to include in your starting loadout, you unlock new items from the camp's forge by picking them up in the dungeon. This seems to happen entirely at random when you pick up a new item. Sometimes it will unlock at the forge, other times nothing happens. After picking up a good number of bandages over a number of runs, I randomly picked up one and unlocked it to the forge. There didn't seem to be any other unique identifiers of that particular bandage that I picked up, so much like curses and boons, I have no clue what is the trigger for unlocking some items. One particular rare boss weapon I unlocked immediately after picking it up for the first time, while finding common double daggers took a handful of pickups to unlock. For all of its issues, Dark Devotion is still a solid game. The combat, once you get a feel for it, is as precise and dodge-heavy as you could want from a Souls-like game. Giant, powerful enemy attacks will hit all around you as you deftly roll, stab, and move your way through a dangerous crypt. The main problem, however, is that it just feels like every other 2D Souls-like game I've played, minus some polish. If you're a ravenous fan of the genre, definitely pick this one up for some more Souls-like action. If you're unsure, I would say maybe hold off or pick up a game that is a bit more polished like Sultan Sanctuary or Hollow Knight. If you liked the video, make sure to click the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell if you'd like to know when we upload our next review. For more news, reviews, and opinions, head on over to GameOctane.com and see what's new.